All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Josh Roberts. I'm the mitigation coordinator with the Larimer County Office of Emergency Management, and you have joined our stakeholder update webinar that our project team, are delivering as part of our Woody Biomass Study and Strategy project. So if this is the place you're meaning to be this morning, then you're in the right place. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Glad you can enjoy, some conversation about this project this morning, to hear some of the updates on our project. And we're excited to communicate this project with you, its goals, what we've accomplished thus far, and what our next steps may be. At this point in the project, we're just past sort of the halfway mark in terms of timing, but it's a nice stopping point for us, to just sort of, communicate with you all, our stakeholders, these pieces of this project, what we've done and what we hope to accomplish in the next phase of the project, if you will. In terms of the project, I know many of you probably are aware of what this project is, but just generally speaking, we're trying to better understand the challenge with liability biomass following wildfire mitigation treatments, how we can better manage that biomass resulting from those treatments, how we can potentially help increase the utilization of this material that results from these treatments. And so we've hired and partnered with some expert consultants, and I'll introduce them in just a minute, to help us, with this study and strategy project. So we've really had a number of conversations with a lot of really knowledgeable folks here local in the area to understand the challenge, liability biomass, with local nuance, local context. We've put the project team and our advisory team, and we'll speak to more of that in a little bit too. But we've put a lot of good thought into how do we quantify the challenge. So in terms of how much do we estimate, we're going to have to be prepared to manage and utilize with an increase in pace and scale of the work. And of course, our consultants are also, this next phase, and they'll talk about it, are going to be diving into what all the potential solutions might be, taking that through a rigorous evaluation framework. So at the end, the deliverable essentially is we have a decent roadmap, a strategy, if you will, for resolving, this challenge here in Larimer County. So speaking of our, expert consultants, we've partnered with Cambium Carbon, and their consultant partner, Planet Geo, is part of this project. Alicia Blake, you see Alicia on the screen. She's the lead consultant with Cambium. Alicia is going to lead us through this presentation today. But before I turn it over to Alicia, just know a couple of administrative items for everyone. We're recording the webinar, and we intend in the days that follow this webinar, we'll put the recording of this webinar on our project webpage, and we can drop that webpage in the chat as well. So just know that we're recording it. For those who couldn't make it today, feel free to share it with them, and we'll communicate with you all. We'll send out an email blast letting you know when we get the webinar on the website. In addition, another administrative items, just know that a few of us will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, tools of the webinar here. Can't promise we'll get to everything, but we'll certainly try to answer those questions that come up via chat as well. So again, welcome. And without further ado, let me turn it over to Alicia Blake to lead us through the webinar this morning. Go ahead, Alicia.
Great. Thanks so much, Josh, and thanks for the intro. Really excited today to share some updates with you all. Some folks we've already talked to a lot, other folks, there are going to be new faces, and for all of that, I'm excited to zoom in. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to go through an overview of the project, share a progress report on where we're at. Josh had mentioned we're just about halfway, I'd say a little bit over halfway at this point. We have a woody biomass analysis preview that we're going to share with you, and excited to also run through a beta tool that our team at Planet Geo has put together for us these last couple months, as well as just talk next steps. Wanted to share some of our faces with you all today and say who is the core project team behind this woody biomass strategy and study here in Larimer County. I'd be remiss not to call out our advisory team, which you'll see the name of those folks later, but they are also a huge component of that core project team. But Josh Roberts, our mitigation coordinator at the county, Marissa and myself here at Cambium. Cambium, if you guys aren't aware, we work to help government and community partners maximize the impact of wood waste. So we're the primary consultant on this project who's responsible for leading all of the components in and around the woody biomass strategy development. And then Planet Geo, our partners at Planet Geo, Morgan and Hannah in particular. Planet Geo works to provide urban forestry software and consulting services to municipalities, nonprofits, universities, private firms, etc. And so they're our GIS consultant and lead and our data experts here on this project today. And we've been really excited to partner across all three of these agencies in coordination with our advisory team to really push this project forward. All right, so let's dive in. Just echoing some of the things that Josh kicked us off with from the top is what are we doing? Really, this project will work to develop a comprehensive woody biomass strategy for the county. Our focus is on liability biomass, but that doesn't mean that we're not also taking into account different biomass that we might see coming out of our urban spaces, perhaps due to maintenance, pest, or disaster, be that storm or development. Our goal here is really to think about how can we further wildfire mitigation efforts? How can we best set up our systems to be climate resilient? How can we understand what might we be able to do with this biomass when it needs to be removed? So what do we mean by woody biomass? It's really composed of trees, right? So including wood from the tree's bole or the trunk, limbs, tops, roots, even the foliage. It can also include things like shrubs and woody plants. I might have mentioned earlier here at Cambium, we think of woody biomass in a wood waste lens. And if we're thinking wood waste, we typically think of the 4Ds. So disaster, disease, development, decay. Really, in other words, the principal sources of the woody biomass that we're thinking about have historically been from trees killed by damaged fire, insects, disease, drought, etc. Hazardous fuel removal is obviously a really, really big driver here, but also tree hazards that we might see in an urban setting, be that pests or otherwise. So not an exhaustive list, but really what we want to do with this project is think about how can we enable end uses to act as a catalyst to be able to remove more of the biomass where it's needed and find end markets to enable us to increase that pace and scale of that woody biomass. So these are some of the things that we are looking at as a project team throughout the lifetime of this project and beyond it about how might we best divert that waste into the streams that it fits. So, right, when we think of logs, that's something like dimensional lumber, slabs, mass timber, post and pole, wood processing byproducts, right? That's really our slash, our sawdust, our shavings. Something that we've heard a big takeaway of is what the heck do I do with this slash? There are options and there is product applications for that. It's really thinking about how can we best set up the system to enable the use of that. And that could be pellets for energy or fuel. It could be carbon dioxide removal strategies, paper products, animal bedding, etc. There's also other opportunities here when we look down to small diameter or tree limbs and log sections. Firewood, of course, is something that the Front Range is very familiar with. And there are some amazing community systems already set up to upcycle and divert waste in the way through firewood. When we think about small diameter trees, there's chips, mulch, compost, biochar. We also actually had a really awesome opportunity here at the end of October to visit Golden West Pine Mills in Larimer County, where they're looking at using small diameter trees in their own engineered wood product. So some really great and really cool things happening from the wood utilization space. And this all wouldn't be possible without those innovative partners that are thinking, how can we push this forward? To level set on the size and the scope of the work that Cambium, Planet Geo, the county, and all of our partners are doing, just wanted to share really high level what that scope of work looks like for us. I recognize there are a lot of words on this page, and as Josh mentioned, you'll absolutely get these slides in this recording later, so feel free to dive in then. But a big part of this project really was reaching out and doing those stakeholder interviews. We have met with over 50 partners to do in-depth interviews to understand how are they utilizing woody biomass, what might be their challenges, where do they see their opportunity, how can we gather information to understand current state, and how might we be able to use that information to better options for the future. I'd say second to that, the old adage, you can't fix what you don't measure. We're absolutely diving into how much biomass volume, woody biomass volume in particular, exists in Larimer County. Excited to share some preliminary results with that. There's also a bit of analysis that we're doing top down, so thinking about what do our forest lands look like, as well as collecting some data on the ground from our urban forestry partners to know from bottom up, how are they also thinking about managing their local forests. There'll be a layer there within that we also consider treatment and how treatment might impact the amount of removal or woody biomass that we'd see at the end of the day. From there, really, once we really know what are we looking at in terms of volume and what does that make up and characterization, how might we be able to use this biomass? What are we doing now? What can we do better in the future? We'll zoom in on the evaluation framework and the key questions that we're considering. And then last bit, really the heart of this project, the heart of this project is to get some solutions on the table. We have done such an amazing job already, Josh, really leading the crew here in terms of collaboration and bringing partners together to think about actionable solution sets. And I think even just knowing that we have this many folks on this call today is really, really exciting, and thinking about once Cambium is no longer here, once this report exists, it doesn't mean that it's just going to sit on a shelf. I can already see that action happening as we've been pushing through this project, and it's really, really exciting. So the evaluation framework, we're really looking at each different solution set. So when I say solution set, it's really an interchangeable mix of things that could be like, how are we sorting and managing our material? Or can we put this type of biomass to biochar? Or might we need to consider this is actually really great material that needs to go towards a log-based product? But we're looking at each of those things in different ways and how they might also interact with one another. So our 5 key things here are effectiveness. So how much wood biomass do we have? And what does that biomass actually look like? Is the solution set actually applied towards those 2 characteristics in a way that it is useful for the county? Impact on public good. What are we thinking about from indirect and direct carbon storage? What are the co-benefits any sort of solution set might have from an economic, social, or environmental opportunity? Is there an opportunity to engage workforce, grow workforce? Is there an opportunity to increase carbon storage, etc.? Readiness. So is this something that we can do now? Right, the county, the Front Range is in a wildfire crisis. So we're looking at both near and long-term solutions. We need near-term solutions to be able to absorb and utilize that biomass as soon as possible, but we also need to be smart and thinking about what are longer term solutions, perhaps higher volume, to continue this process going forward. What are those? And then in addition to that, right, how are we thinking about challenges? What's the regulatory barriers that we might run into? Is there permitting or policy that we need to consider, even if it is a near-term solution? Scalability, exactly as the namesake says it is. So do we have markets that can meet the demand for a product? Is it able to scale in term with the demand? And as well, is it able just to scale in general, or are we looking at something a little bit more modular? And last bit, of course, is efficiency. What's the estimated ROI on this product? Really, what are we thinking about in terms of capital investment? Of course, different things cost different dollars. Different systems are already in place. So we'll really want to take different strategies and solution sets through this entire framework and consider all of these levers to know how are we best thinking about managing biomass here in the county and also adjacent to the county. We know that Larimer County is not in its own bubble. There are so many partners within the county and outside the county, adjacent to this county, that are also considering these same questions, and we want to be able to work together as we go through this. So to level set on all of those things, where we're at today, we are definitely over half. I think the big bulk of the beginning of this project was really understanding current state and talking to these partners, understanding our biomass, and we're partway through here thinking about analysis and that evaluation framework. We're really, really excited here in the last stretch of this project to zoom in on those action-ready solutions, to really get down on paper what we feel like we need to do to move forward together. The goal is to really wrap up this project by the end of February, but that doesn't mean that we can't start taking action sooner. So we're going to be working towards a community workshop to hear your voices, bring you together, have conversations as we near the end of this project too. So as I mentioned, none of this could have happened just with those few faces from the start of the team. These are the folks that are on our advisory team. Some of those folks are likely on this call today. We have folks represented from our conservation district, from the university in an economics lens. We have city representation, economic workforce development, folks from solid waste, emergency services specialist partners, our fire districts, etc. Just so many folks that are really putting their minds to helping and supporting and guiding us throughout this process that really is across the board.
Yeah, and if Felicia, I could jump in here. I just,
Mhm.
while I have an opportunity here publicly, if you will, I just want to express some just huge, tremendous thanks to the folks that you see on this slide at this point in the presentation. Our advisory team, they've just been great. We've had a lot of great, insightful conversations with them. They've provided just some tremendous advisement from their unique perspective. So really, really appreciate their efforts and engagement into this project to help steer what we're doing and help guide a lot of this work that we're doing. And as you can see on the screen, there are a number of different perspectives represented. And if I could just point that out to everyone. This challenge, it's a very nuanced challenge, and it involves a lot of different sort of aspects and perspectives. And so, because of that, it's only right and it's necessary to meet that challenge with the same breadth of perspective, and insight. So, we're proud of the advisory team and the work that they've done. And so, just wanted to say a big thanks. So, sorry, Alicia, but thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate that. And we really appreciate all of you. And I'll echo Josh's sentiment for the folks on this screen, but also there are some folks that aren't a part of our advisory team that from the U.S. Forest Service, from the local conservation districts as well, that we have spent countless hours with asking them questions and making sure that we're moving in the right direction too. So thank you to those folks on this screen, but also a huge thank you to those who might not be on this screen. All right, so let's dive in a bit more about where we are today. So this is just a really quick snapshot of our progress, and I'll zoom in on each of these as we continue throughout the presentation. So as I mentioned, we've had over 50 in-depth interviews completed with a variety of participants. We've done a lot when we talk about woody biomass analysis. When we kicked off this project, we actually did a data audit to really understand what data might be available, how we might be able to best characterize the biomass on the landscape with what is available today. And then we also have gone through 2 iterations of woody biomass analysis based on conversations and feedback from those folks that you saw on the slide before, as well as others. And as I mentioned, we'll be sharing a beta dashboard tool with you today. Communications, if you haven't heard from us yet, you'll continue to hear from us in the future now after this presentation, but we've been trying our best to really bring folks together to not wait until this project is done and to start implementing their own solutions throughout and to think about their own solutions as well. So we have our community landing page, and I'll give a shout here to our team. If they haven't yet dropped that website into the chat, please do so. You'll see monthly letters and advisory team meetings from us. And we've also had a handful of in-depth on-sites and on-site meetings with some really amazing partners that are doing woody biomass utilization work, but also folks that are doing other work within the county. To zoom in a little bit on who we've talked to, It is really, really across the board, as Josh said. This is a nuanced situation we see ourselves in, and we want to be sure that we're hearing perspectives from all different partners. So from a wood generation side, we've talked to government crews, forest managers, arborists and tree care contractors, really thinking across the gamut. In the wood processing space, we talked to sawmills, organics recycling, composting, bioenergy, biochar, carbon dioxide removal. We've talked to folks both within the state and outside of the state if we're thinking about some nascent technologies that perhaps we haven't considered already here in Colorado. It's been a wide breadth, and we've been really immensely grateful for the conversations we've had. Wood product buyers, so what does that demand look like? Who might utilize this material? How are we thinking about the markets in the future? And then community groups. Of course, how can we think about what this issue, what the wildfire crisis is doing to our communities, how woody biomass utilization might impact these communities, how can we consider workforce development and or economic development into the same lens? So here's just a smattering. I said over 50 partners. These bullet points really don't even cover the gamut of all of those partners. And if you don't see your name, no, it's not because we didn't appreciate our conversation. We absolutely did, and are excited to zoom more in on that when we get into our evaluation framework later on in this project. But these are a smattering of list of the folks that we talked to across each of these different partner types and some challenges and opportunities that we've seen. Some key things that I really want to call out here is challenges that we know and understand obviously vary based on the group, but we really had some three key themes that stood out to us. One of that was road infrastructure and workforce to reach and manage the material needs to be improved. There's a challenge there. A second is the need to process low-grade materials. So think slash, residue, etc., at higher volumes. And then the last bit is from a market perspective, how might we collect, aggregate, and really bring together that woody biomass in one opportunity? You'll see there are other opportunities here too that have been called out. So different groups ask for different things or are looking for different things. And this is where when we think about a solution set, it's not just a silver bullet. This is where we'll think and need support across community members to really implement their own boots on the ground solutions, as well as how we think about this systematically at the county level. So for example, it's thinking about training our fire departments to complete more safe pile burning where we need that. It's investing in road infrastructure, continuing support for different funding and transportation. We've heard a lot about supporting workforce development and long-term viability in that space, as well as really considering alternative funding forms and large-scale mitigation biomass opportunity layered in together. So I just want to echo those 3 points that I brought up because I think they're really, really important as we zoom into this next phase of the project, as we look at our woody biomass analysis overall. How might we answer or address these 3 challenges to the best of our ability? And those 3 key challenges are road infrastructure and workforce to reach and manage the material, the ability to process low-grade material, slash and residue at high volumes, and then finding a best way to collect, aggregate, and market that woody biomass. All right. So thinking about those 3 challenges and then layering it into our woody biomass analysis, we really need to know how we are actually getting to that material, if that material pays its way out of the woods, and then if so, what are we going to be doing with it afterwards? Or if not, how can we best support its way to pay its way out of the woods? So as we zoom into this next section, the woody biomass analysis, I just want to give a huge, huge thanks. And I think this is just a webinar of thanks because it really, we couldn't have done this without our partners at Planet Geo, the Forest Service, Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, and others in helping us think through a methodology, development, and data collection in and around characterizing our biomass today. Just a high-level overview of how we looked at our biomass analysis, and we'll have some methodology documents and other things for you guys to zoom in on later. But we really looked at this in two different ways. One was using a 2016 tree map data at a 30-meter resolution for what we call outside of the priority ribbon. And I'll share with you what that looks like in a couple of slides here, and then a 60-centimeter resolution of high definition with inside the priority ribbon. And the reason being is we know that 2016 is quite a bit ago. Different fires have happened along the landscape already, different treatments have happened across the landscape already, and we wanted to do our best to understand what is happening with biomass as we know of it today. So we went through and characterized data using these two key data sets to look at live biomass, dead biomass, saw log versus non-saw log, and forest type metrics. In addition, as I mentioned, we went through and considered how are we thinking about fire that has happened on the landscape already, how we also looked at treatment that has already happened. And this is another big shout out again to our partners here for doing that work and pulling in those efforts to know where treatment has already occurred. And then also, how can we think about getting to that biomass? Lots of words on the slide, but this is really just a highlight for you all that we are looking at a slew of boundaries that informing this data and really taking into account different key metrics here for you to be able to take this tool, to take this data and apply it to your own planning needs. So that looks like land ownership and watersheds, fire districts. I'll zoom in a little bit here on pods and the next slide, as well as the priority ribbon, but know that those are two really big key things that we use when thinking about how can we best attack fire mitigation as a whole. And then really, what does feasibility look like? Can we get to those spaces? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is there road access? Is there not? What does the slope look like? What does our canopy look like today? All right. So I had mentioned a couple of slides ago the priority ribbon, and you can see it highlighted here right in the middle of the slide. So this is a biomass summary table. And what this does is that this is an entire picture of all of the biomass that we understand today that exists in the forest land landscape within Larimer County. So this doesn't take into account overlaying treatment or feasibility. This is basically everything that just exists today. And when you look at that, roughly 32% of that exists within the priority ribbon. So the landscape that holds high priority interconnected fire treatments is 32% of that total. You can see within that too, there is a range of live and dead biomass that we still need to manage as partners, and we still need to think about how might we utilize this when it comes out of the forest. So how do we actually manage this land? It is managed in part by all of our partners in a variety of ways. And this is just high level, right? But when we think about this and the ownership of biomass projects, it's really critical for planning, coordination, implementation, et cetera. And it really plays a big role in determining the accessibility of the biomass, how much is coming out of the forest, and how we might utilize it. For example, the federal government may have a big focus on wildfire risk reduction, and their land ownership is the largest within the region, over 80% of the entire county. And to that end too, when we think about who's owning the land and how much biomass is there, we think about the characterization and the species and the type and how we might be able to access that once it's treated. The second piece to this that I want to call out is how big of a component our private and nonprofit partners also have a huge contribution to the total biomass in the county. So you can see here that although the federal government has over 80% of the county, there is still an immense amount of biomass that is existing in our private and nonprofit spaces. So we can think about how can we partner together, and we've heard really great stories of these partnerships already to do some of this work. So Another zoom in here on our forest type. So probably unsurprisingly to everyone on this call, if you know anything about the forest types within the mountains, ponderosa and lodgepole make up to almost 70% of the total biomass within the region. When we think about that, we need to think about markets that are for lodgepole and ponderosa specifically, and need to understand what we might be able to do with some of that, again, slash and residue wood. So we really want to think about the types of trees that are present within any given landscape because their quality, quantity, their moisture rates, their energy potential, etc., really change how we think about biomass utilization. Just a really big, just like a key item to call out on this slide is when you look at lodgepole alone, across our landscape, our forested landscapes today, there are 5 million tons of dead biomass waiting to be removed. That's a lot. It doesn't mean that we can't do that or we can't remove it or can't think about treatment in other ways, but it is there and we're working towards managing it. Okay, so to zoom back out, what we just looked at was that very top layer of this inverse pyramid was our total woody biomass at the very, very top of what exists on our forested landscapes today. What we're aiming to do now, and what we have been working to do in partnership with a handful of folks, is think through of that biomass, what is feasible and accessible. Feasible being, what does the slope look like on the landscape for mechanical treatment versus hand treatment? What does a canopy look like? So we're actually going to go in and treat based on canopy coverage, previous treatment, if there's a burn that has already existed in the landscape before, and then accessible. One of the challenges we heard across the board is the need to be able to get to the biomass, the need to be able to perhaps make more roads to get to more biomass. So we really need to look at our road systems today, our forest road systems, et cetera, and know if we can actually access and treat some of those opportunities. And then the last bit is when thinking about managing the total is what does treatment actually look like on the landscape? So are we doing a prescribed burn? Or are we doing some mechanical thinning? Are we actually removing all of the biomass when we do mechanical thinning, or are we leaving part of it on the landscape? Are we just doing crown treatment, etc.? So there are a lot of different factors that we need to consider when we really want to estimate woody biomass for removal overall. Before I move into how we're thinking about this from a scenario standpoint, we really wanted to share, and again, there are a lot of words on this slide, and you'll have these slides as a takeaway, but we really wanted to share how important feasibility is and what feasibility to us means. And feasibility is now that intermix of what does the slope look like, what does the canopy look like, and what does accessibility look like across the landscape. And so these treatment feasibility layers that you'll see in the dashboard, that you'll see in our scenarios and our analyses, came with support and definitions from CFRI and all the amazing work that our wildfire crisis partners have done long before our team has joined the project. So really big thank you to them in putting forth some of these definitions and the availability and the ability for us to amend them to fit this project as well. So we look at something within a pod boundary treatment, which is that exists on the edge of a pod or a potential operational delineation. A roadside treatment, think anything that's happening on the other side of the road, home ignition zone, right, around your properties, your private properties, etc. Landscape treatments. So those are when you look at something, I'll say landscape treatments are split into two different categories here. So accessible and inaccessible. Those that are accessible fall within a half-mile radius of a road, meaning that it is accessible or possible for us to do some mechanical treatment within that area on average. We know that that might vary. Inaccessible means that it does not fall within half-mile edge of the road. And where we see treatment happening within these areas might be a mix of mechanical thinning and prescribed treatment. It could be just prescribed treatment, etc. And then not feasible is basically everything that falls outside of these. This could also be hand treatment, slope that's greater than 40%, etc. All of this is really important when we think about our scenario analyses and the influence that it might have in the amount of biomass that is coming out of the forest in any given area. I want to truly, truly hone in on that every single project is different, every stand is different. Folks on this call, I'm sure, know that very, very intimately, that what you might expect for removal or what you might expect for treatment needs to vary once you're actually on the land. So what did we do with these 5 different feasibility categories, the land ownership and the forest type we have today? We worked really, really closely with USFX fire experts and our conservation partner districts to estimate the tonnage per acre removed during treatment. And then we ran these data through 5 different scenarios based on land ownership, forest type, and feasibility category to estimate a range of woody biomass that's expected to be removed. So when we say forest type, I wanted to call out too, we're talking subalpine, upper montane, those different type of forest types that you've seen earlier, and feasibility category, the slide before that I just ran through. And each of these have different multipliers and ways when we think about treatment and estimated biomass. And that's a really big thing I want to call out is estimated. It is definitely an estimated number, but we're doing our best to really put forth an educated guess on how we can consider our markets. So to summarize all of that, how does this actually look? The very first slide I showed you was 112.7 million tons of total woody biomass. If we look at just the feasible and accessible, so that area of biomass that we feel exists within the total that we can get access to today and is feasible to treat today, that's roughly 47.4 million tons. However, when you go in and do treatment, you're not treating and removing 100% of that biomass that exists in the forest today. Rather, you're only treating a percentage of it, and a percentage of that treatment is the amount that is removed. So we're working through this with, like I said, our USFS Forest Service partners, as well as our conservation districts on that tonnage level to really give better estimates of what we think biomass removal will look like in a range from low to high based on our different treatment types. Something that is really important to note is that right now this is just forestry volumes. So we're, like I said, we're doing a bottom-up analysis to also include urban canopy volumes. They manage biomass a little bit different, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. So current discussions and estimates really suggest we're removing roughly or treating roughly 100 to 150 K tons per year across all of these different partners, all these different projects. We've heard that there's an ability to perhaps remove more if markets exist, and we want to understand what that might look like and the systems we need to put in place to do so. But it's important to also note that even if we look at a percentage of that 47.4 million acres, and we're only, let's say, treating, I'm sorry, 47.4 million tons, and we're only treating 100K of that annually, there is a huge opportunity for us to increase our pace and scale to do some of this mitigation efforts collectively. All right, now probably the moment everyone has been waiting for. I'd like to pass this over to Hannah Gregory at Planet Geo to share her screen and run through our beta version of the Larimer County Woody Biomass Estimate that's now available on our project webpage. So you can go there right now, perhaps wait until Hannah does her overview, and start to look at the dashboard. We do have a link for you to share your feedback with us. This is a beta version, so we'd like to hear from you if you have some recommendations or something you happen to go in and you broke it. Amazing, let us know, and so we can get this fixed and make sure that this tool is fit to meet your needs. I'll note that this is looking at total biomass. This doesn't take into that treatment type into account. This is really meant as a planning tool for you to be able to zoom in and understand in certain project areas how you might consider treatment and what that removal might look like yourselves. All right, go ahead, Anna.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Alicia. Let me get my screen shared. All right, can everyone see this? Yeah, cool. Amazing. Okay, so this is the initial view of the biomass dashboard. We have a splash screen here. It eventually will have an overview tutorial similar to what I'll be showing today, linked out from there. So if you ever need a reminder of how to use the tool, so that's coming soon. So entering the dashboard here, I want to draw everyone's attention to this left-hand panel on the side here. I'm going to open that up. This gives just a generic overview of the dashboard, the purpose of the dashboard, and then eventually we'll have a few things linked out from here, including a walkthrough video, a project planning scenario video, a user reference guide, and then also a detailed methodology document. So looking at the map here, we've got several different layers available. Some are turned on, some aren't. So I'm gonna come to this layer section here. We've got quite a few different reference boundaries. So these boundaries don't contain biomass data. They're just used, or they're just there for the user to turn on and use as a reference. So for example, we have HUC 12 watersheds. Let's see what that looks like. They're all labeled. We'll turn on another one just as a example. Fire history. You can turn on and see the recent fires that have occurred in Larimer County. Go ahead and turn that one off. And then we have the treatment feasibility layer. So this is the colored palette that you see on here. I'll turn on, whoops. Hang on. The legend here. So you can see we have those 6 different feasibility categories, and then additionally those are separated by outside the priority ribbon and within the priority ribbon. And then lastly, we have the hexagon layer, and the hexagon layer is what this entire dashboard works off of. So those are 1/10 of a square mile hexagons that the biomass data is summarized by. So as you select things on this screen, it'll update all of the numbers and metrics we see here, which I'll talk about next. So we have 4 different panes on this right-hand side of the screen. This first pane is summarizing all of those raw biomass statistics. So total biomass, total acres, average tree canopy percent, and then a breakdown of that total biomass. So live biomass, dead biomass, saw log versus non-saw log, and yeah, so all of those metrics. On the second screen here, we have a breakdown of the forest type. So we can look at the proportion of the forest type represented on the screen, and then also the total biomass summarized by the forest type. Moving on, we've got this feasibility type and priority. So this is broken down by outside of the priority ribbon versus the priority ribbon. And then we have all of those 6 categories. And as I mentioned, this will change as you update the map, and I'll show that in a second. And then lastly, we have a breakdown by ownership. So we have the proportion of ownership and then the total biomass by ownership. So we have these 5 main landowner types, and then a more granular landowner bars within the main screen here. So moving on to these filters up top, we've got 3 different filters: treatment feasibility, pod, and HUC 12 watersheds. So I'm just going to show a quick drop down. This filter will allow you to filter the screen to these treatment types, both within the ribbon and outside of the ribbon. We've got all of the pods in this drop down here, so you can filter based on that. And then same with the watersheds. So I'm going to show an example of how you can use these filters. So say we want to look at all of the home ignition zone treatment areas. So I'm going to turn that on for both inside of the ribbon and outside of the ribbon. And I will say that this hexagon layer is huge, so just be a little patient when you're clicking around within the dashboard. It will take a few seconds to completely update. So you can see on the map here, it's filtered all of those hexagons down by just the ones that are within these HIZ treatment areas. And you can see it updated all of these metrics based on this selection. So we can see it updated the forest type breakdown, the treatment feasibility breakdown. You can see it's just showing the HIZ treatments because that's what we have filtered. And then it's also showing the breakdown of the ownership type. So we can see it's mostly private and nonprofit within those HIZ zones. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the dashboard here and use one of these pod and watershed filters. So as you turn on a filter here, it'll zoom in and just give it a second here. It'll filter all of those hexagons based on that pod boundary. And it updated all these metrics based on that selection there. You can see it did the same thing with the forest type, the treatment feasibility. So you can see most of the area within this pod is in the priority ribbon. And then you can see the land ownership breakdown within that pod. And then I wanted to show one more thing. If you want to get more specific with the selection of the polygons, or sorry, the hexagons, you can do a self-select on the map screen here. So first I'll just show, like, when you click something on the screen here, it's going to give you a pop-up so you can see it selected that priority ribbon. I'm going to exit out. And then I'm going to zoom in here. Just give it a second to load. Get my, oops, my selection here. So I have a lasso tool here. So say you have a project area that you want to select hexagons within that project area. You can just select there. And then it's going to update all of that information based on your selection on the screen. So you can see this within this selection of polygons, it's all ponderosa pine, or at least that's a majority forest type for all of those hexagons. This is all not feasible to treat within the priority ribbon. And then we can see a breakdown of the land ownership type. So we can see it's split between federal government and private and nonprofit. So that mostly covers all of the tools and how to use this dashboard. We'll eventually have a video link, as I mentioned, but definitely feel free to use that feedback link because we are continuously updating this dashboard based on everyone's feedback. So I'll pass it back to Alicia.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hannah. And just a really, really, I mean, big round of applause to Planet Geo for all the time and effort they put into building this tool and the analysis that they've done across the landscape. Really excited again to share with you all. So thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Morgan, for all the work on the dashboard. All right. So next steps, as we wrap up this webinar, and then we'll have a few minutes here to try our best to answer some questions, but we're going to be sharing this woody biomass estimate dashboard for partner use and really get that feedback, as we mentioned. We're going to do a deep dive of potential solution sets within the evaluation framework shared. And then as a teaser here, we're looking to do an in-person solutions workshop planned for mid-January. So an invite is coming soon. We're going to send that to the folks that joined us on the webinar today, as well as other folks within our network. And that will look like a really engaging in-person session at the EOC. Goodness gracious, Josh, I can't remember what EOC stands for, but really to try to start to think about solutions that we can look to implement right now and those partnerships that we can build. All right. And with that, that really wraps up our presentation today. If you're not already on our contact list, please, please, please go ahead and connect with us and join that list and continue to stay updated. Thanks so much. So if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And if anyone is monitoring the chat, please let me know.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. Really appreciate you walking through this presentation here. So if you can, feel free, you can drop your question in the chat or in the Q&A tool, or if you raise your hand, we can also try to unmute you, and you can ask your question the old-fashioned way as well. So I see, Dennis, you've got your hand raised, or actually, you just lowered it. So Alicia, I'll just kind of look through the chat
Yeah.
tools here.
I think the only thing I was going to follow up on is I saw Kevin's note, and also, hey, Kevin, from our neighbors at Boulder County. I know the information that we've received from stakeholders on what currently happens with woody biomass coming out of those treatment efforts. As Josh mentioned, it's definitely a mixed bag, and a lot of anecdotal uh, answers. So I would say hard to get a precise kind of flow diagram on that. Everything from animal bedding and agricultural partnerships to firewood left on site. I think the Forest Service mentioned that a lot of the work that they do specifically around home areas, homeowners often like to keep some of that firewood. Some of it going to biochar now, other organics processors in the area, but it is kind of a range at present. I wouldn't say we heard a universal answer
Mhm.
there. The only other thing I would add is that on the question about pile burned, I think a lot of what we heard from land managers is that the ability to get burn permits has really limited what they're actually able to burn, which would ideally be a greater part of the solution set from a lot of our forest partners.
Yeah, definitely. Good to see you on the call, Kevin. Thanks for your question there, and this just the coordination points, and um, just to sort of reiterate, Boulder County is doing a somewhat similar study at the same time, so we've enjoyed some coordination across county lines there with respect to this challenge, and so good to see you, Kevin, and yeah, let's connect soon. John, let me you should be able to unmute and ask your question now, John.
Yeah, thank you. John Jordanengo here with Economic Restoration Services. Really appreciate the discussion and the amazing GIS work and planning that went into this. On the analysis side, you showed an example where there was you had drawn the lasso and it came up as unfeasible to do treatments there. And I'm wondering if the tool is going to have an option to see a description or sort of a narrative about, why exactly is that not feasible in that zone, just providing that little depth of more information from an analysis side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
John,
great. Yeah, go ahead, Alicia. You take that one.
yeah, really appreciate the question. And I think it would be amazing for us to provide more in-depth context there. So that area in particular that Hannah zoomed in on was actually part of the Cameron Peak fire for 2020. So that is considered not feasible based on those definitions. And actually, I can flip back to them really quickly that we have amended today. So in terms of what does not feasible mean? It's anything that's not falling within these categories above. It's a slope greater than 40% and equal or less than 10% canopy cover. So if I was a Benton person, that's definitely when we think of the Cameron Peak fire, that is why that is considered not feasible. In the future, though, I can see absolutely in doing a zoom out and when it comes to our methodology of sharing some of those more nuanced I guess, contextual reasons why something might not be feasible. So it might not be exactly in the tool when you do a lasso, but happy to include that within a methodology doc. Cool. Thanks so much, John, and thanks for hopping on.
Yep. Thanks, John. Great question. Thanks, Alicia. And just if the chat feature or tool of this webinar here isn't working for you, alternatively, you can use the Q&A feature of Zoom here to ask the question, or just like John just did, raise your hand, we'll unmute you. So we'll hold for any other questions. All right, I
right,
see a few questions coming in through the Q&A. So how about we do this? I'll read the question aloud and then we can just, answer from there. So this one's from Dave. Did insurance requirements for contract pile burning come up as a concern? As an example, some nonprofit partners may not be able to burn piles on private land because of expensive insurance requirements by the state. I'll take a stab at that, and then
Thanks,
Alicia,
Josh.
Marissa, team, if you guys want to add, any flavor in here. Short answer is yes, sir. It's definitely come up, in conversations, with respect to this particular project and how we can estimate some of the biomass. It's not really reflected so much, in that total estimation, but we certainly know, it is a conversation, it is concern, it's something that folks are actively talking about and thinking through. And we know also that, a goal of a lot of this wildfire risk reduction work is to try to get beneficial fire back on the landscape. And, for various reasons, to include the insurance thing, you're referencing here, as well as just the conditions of our forest. We have to get there, and oftentimes that also comes with, initial entry of a treatment using mechanical or hand thinning means. Alicia or Marissa or anyone, any flavor to add to that question?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think I have anything in particular to add to that, but it was absolutely a challenge that was brought up by more than one partner.
Got it. Thanks. Next question from Tim. Does the county maintain any zoning layers that would indicate potential location for new biomass facilities? Again, I'll take a stab, Alicia, Marissa,
Thanks.
feel free to add some color. Short answer is yes. Obviously, we have, comprehensive planning. We have land use zones, identified. Personally, I don't think I've considered that yet as part of this project, but Alicia, Marissa, and Tim, thanks for pointing that out. I think that is a good idea. We might find some fruit in getting with our planning folks at the county and just kind of layering in where some of those opportunities, might be. So I love that. I'm going to write that down. Alicia, Marissa,
Yeah.
anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say I think it is a good note. At the stage we are in the process, a lot of the early work has been in quantifying and characterizing our biomass as a whole. And so in this next step, really moving into the in-depth solution set and planning, a big piece of that is how can you help co-locate processing infrastructure with where we think treatment activity is most feasible and where we're going to see the most biomass coming out of the forest. And so I think a natural next step is to start diving in more specifically on siting and that infrastructure build out. So that's definitely something that we'll take into account as we think about it.
Great. Thanks. Next question. As we are exposed or learn about new technologies, will the website tool be updated? Certainly I'll mention that website tool. It's in beta version at the moment, so we want you guys to use it, poke around in it, and give us some feedback on how we can, improve or enhance that user experience. And that may include some additional reference layers, some additional things we can, add to the website tool. As far as that, how would that apply to new technologies? I'm not thinking of a clear and direct link to that particular piece of the question, but Alicia, Marissa, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so we've talked about this a little bit in so far as how might we enable this tool because it is just total biomass on the landscape. We really expect this to be used as a planning tool for our partners to say how much biomass exists in this area and then how might I overlay my own project and treatment on top of it. So something that we've absolutely talked about as partners over at the Northern Colorado Fireshed, as well as CFRI and others have a handful of planning tools that they've been also using and putting together to really be able to more real time know what treatment has happened already and how are we thinking about priority. And in the future, we absolutely see how might we be able to partner with them to make sure that those tools might be able to talk to one another so we better understand, okay, treatment has already happened here, or perhaps a fire that has happened here, and making sure that those data layers stay updated so this doesn't just become a singular snapshot in time. Yeah, I'd also say perhaps not necessarily exposed to new technologies, but again, just keeping it up to date is what does this look like on an annual basis if new data comes out from the Forest Service, more or less are future services running. So we make sure that this is able to use from here on out. Want to do a quick time check. It is 1 after the hour, so if folks need to drop, please feel free. But there was one last question here that I would be happy to take. Is there a difference between woody biomass and liability biomass? Marissa,
I would say
Yeah.
just we are not in this analysis focusing on yard waste as a big component. So that would be the big distinguishing factor in my mind. But yeah, really focused on everything from small diameter trees and slash, but really focused more on tree biomass as the area of reference.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, thanks all. So again, as Alicia mentioned, this kind of concludes our webinar. So feel free to jump if you've got other things to get to. Also, I'll just do a last sort of tone out for any remaining final questions. All right. Seeing no hands raised and seeing no questions in the Q&A feature here of Zoom, let me just close by, thanking our project consultant team, Alicia, Marissa, David with Cambium and their organization, as well as Hannah Morgan and the good folks at Planet Geo. Appreciate y'all's time today. Thanks for all of your work and efforts on this project. Thanks for, presenting to our friends, here in Larimer County. So really appreciate you as always. Also, a thanks to all of you who are still on the webinar with us. Thanks for your attendance, for your questions, for your interest. Feel free to visit our project webpage. Sign up for project newsletters. We've been sending those out monthly to keep folks up to date, and poke around on the beta dashboard. As Alicia mentioned, try to break it. Please don't, but if you do, let us know. Give us some feedback where we might be able to enhance that user experience. So with that said, thanks again, everyone.
Oh, it's already recording.
Mic check.
Yep, we are good. Apparently it's already recording, so I'm hopeful that we can edit that.
Yeah,
But
we can.
recording is happening. Okay,
Yep, totally. Yeah,
great.
and somebody,
Thank-
David, he may not, there's like I wasn't aware, but there's a button on the bottom right where it says enter webinar. He may have to,
Am I here?
or David, no, you're
Okay.
there. My bad.
Okay.
My bad, dude. There you are. Cool.
Great, I'm gonna get my screen up.
Yep. We do have some participants who've joined, I believe,
Great.
already. So those of you who have joined us, just hang out for a bit while we get prepared for the webinar this morning. So Alicia, Cambium Planet Geo team, you'll see the participant numbers, at the bottom of the screen. And in the side panel, they'll have a panelists and attendees. So you can see panelists and attendees numbers there. All right, but if everyone will just hang on for a couple more minutes, we'll get started shortly. and have a great day. EOC clear.